Welcome to our episode, Open Up the Workforce. Today, we have a very exciting speaker in store. We have Nhlamu, the Global Head of People at KPMG International. Nhlamu, will you share a little bit more about your background and what led to your current role as Global Head of People?
Thanks, Ahva. My background in short form, I qualified as a clinical psychologist. Very early on in my career, I got into consulting. So I never really practiced in psychology. And I've been in consulting for most of my career. But in between, I've been an entrepreneur running my own consulting firm. I've also worked for a bank as an HR executive for organizational development. I then got invited back into KPMG to come and run the People and Change consulting team. And I did that for a number of years. I was subsequently nominated onto the board of KPMG South Africa and then asked to head up HR, or what we call people, the people function in the firm. So I did both consulting and an internal role at the same time. During the crisis that we had in South Africa in 2017, I was asked to become the CEO, which I did for about 15 months before moving to the international firm. And what I started off doing in the international firm was mainly work on culture and ethics. You asked me how I ended up in my role. A lot of that work was based on the learnings from what we'd done in South Africa and what I'd seen across the globe. And then I became the global head of people 6 months later. So I've been in this role now for almost 4 years. And that's how I got there.
Fascinating that you share this. And as somebody who's studying this space, I have such a passion for organizational development. And when we looked at your background, we saw that you have a background in psychology as well. Would you be able to maybe speak to how those elements have guided you in the work that you've done to be able to do so much of this multifaceted work?
Yeah, I think the background in psychology has helped look at organizational dynamics from a point of trying to understand causality. So how do we end up with the dynamics that we have? What do we need to solve for? So I've done both the culture and change side of the people work, but I've also done the more technical side of it, especially in consulting, where you did need to do things like organizational redesign, looking at harder organizational strategy projects. But what it helps with is to actually understand how you enable change in behavior, change in how things are done inside an organization. So I'm really grateful for that background. It's been critical in helping me work, especially with leaders and making sure that there's real belief in what people are trying to achieve.
I couldn't agree more in how powerful that background is. And at KPMG, we studied and saw that you put together an impact plan that has 4 main categories: governance, people, planet, prosperity. Can you walk us through, from a high level, what are KPMG's people commitments?
So there are 3 areas that we talk about under people. It's inclusion, diversity, and equity. And you will hear me talking about IDE instead of DEI, and maybe I should start there and explain why we do it that way. So for us, we start with inclusion because we believe that it's critical to build a sense of belonging for everyone. And then the other areas tend to work. So I know that a lot of people are now talking about DEIB, which includes a sense of belonging, which is really great to see. So there's IDE. Then there's also learning that we report on, and health and well-being. So maybe if I just give you a flavor of what's under each of the categories. In inclusion, diversity, and equity, we essentially focus on 3 pillars of our strategy, which we actually co-developed with our people. So we actually sourced the information of what people want to see included in our strategy from them. So we had a conversation with more than 17,000 people. That's what led to those 3 pillars. The 3 pillars themselves, we want to build an inclusive culture that is based on trust. We want to have an educated workforce. So we've invested a lot in that. And the third pillar of it is to become an advocate for equality as a firm. So everything that we report in terms of metrics talks to those three pillars. So that's our focus area. Then in terms of learning and development, we do report on hours spent, what each person has spent on learning. We also look at the actual spend, so the financials of how much we're spending educating our people. But I think behind all of that, we've got a learning and development strategy, and we showcase some of the work that we're doing there. And in this previous one, if you've looked at it, you'll see that we also talk about some of the foundational skills that we're building for everyone, like ESG skills at a foundational level. We do want our people not only to talk about ESG in the colloquial terms, but to really understand how they can contribute and what it means and their role in it. The other area that we're providing foundational skills for is digital and data analytics, which is very much related to the type of work that we do. Then in terms of health and well-being, what we have focused on is how do we support our people and be leading more healthier lives, physical health as well as mental well-being to ensure that it's at the forefront. So we showcase a number of stories of things that we've been doing across all of our member firms. So that's what's in the report.
Fascinating. And Symba, and I feel like I could talk to you and unpack so many of these elements. I think the first thing that you had mentioned was the fact you sourced this information from 17,000 individuals before you came up with a plan. And it's so powerful, right? That you really understand the root of the challenges before you come up with a solution. Can you guide us through that process of collecting that information, how you went about that research?
So actually, the research that we did was sparked by the unfortunate death of George Floyd. So what we chose to do at that time as a firm is to truly go into a space of understanding what it is that we need to learn as an organization and what we need to do to respond, to have sustainable change and meaningful change rather than just reacting to what was an emotionally charged environment. And we were quite intentional with it. I think the background is important because we knew we were going to have a conversation about ethnicity and racial issues. But we knew if we can find a way of entering that conversation and extract what it is we need to do, we can apply that to all the other areas that we focus on when we think about inclusion, diversity, and equity. So we took from that experience and we actually overlaid, and we did it deliberately, and overlaid that to become our holistic plan for inclusion and diversity. How we did it was we ran a jam, what we call a jam, with one of our service providers where they invited everyone. We invited everyone onto a platform. So it wasn't face-to-face. It was on a platform that we ran for 72 hours. And we curated questions on the platform by consulting with various groups of people within the organization. So by the time we went onto the platform, we had specific questions we wanted people to answer that sparked a conversation. So out of the conversations, every day, the conversations would be summarized into core themes that we would then build upon until we ended up summarizing them into 3 core areas. What we saw was absolutely amazing. People's willingness to share their personal experiences, a lot of pain, but also a lot of relief in terms of being heard and sharing real lived experience. People also shared a lot of material around the things that you can use. So here's some educational resource you can tap into. Here's something that I've experienced that has been helpful. So by the time we finished the 3-day run, we had a wealth of data. We also invited leaders. So we had a number of our senior partners who are the CEOs of some of our big firms joining the conversation. And it was actually quite opening, but also a release, I think, for us as an organization and an ability for everyone to have their say on a topic that matters. So that's how we built it. And we took those 3 themes and we then developed a plan based on the 3 themes. And that's how we come to specific things that we're doing, whether it's around LGBTQ+, whether it's around people living with disabilities, ethnicity, gender, we apply the same lens. I know that we're looking at other areas like social mobility, which you're interested in, Ahva. So we are applying the lessons from that in different ways, and it's serving us really well.
Incredibly powerful for so many reasons, because oftentimes when we look at data collection, we often think of a survey. But the fact that this sparks conversation, not only in capturing that data, but like you said, you're creating a platform for people to feel heard and to speak up. That is a very fascinating model that I think other leaders can explore a little bit more as well. And I wanted to kind of transition into discussing health and well-being of your workplace and what actions you're doing to further support the mental health of your employees, in addition to what you just shared.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's fair to say almost every organization that I come across has employee assistance programs. We now have a lot of other supportive mechanisms like the health apps. You've got mental well-being apps that have come up, which is great to see, and a lot of help in terms of physical well-being. One of the questions, we've got all of those in our different member firms, but the main question we've been asking ourselves is, what are the things that we can control, that we can help our people by managing better? So it's what are the causal issues of people feeling overloaded? You've seen a lot of reporting around burnout and stress and workloads, and we focused our attention on that in the last few months, probably 18 months, and looked at, if we look at the way that work is done inside the organization, where are the areas where we can support our people better? So we focus our attention on that, but we continue as well to provide for mental health and well-being support using those other mechanisms. So we've gone and looked at the way that we allocate work. Is it where can we actually reduce where we might be stretched? How do we manage all of that? How do we manage the business issues that need to be managed to make people work in a more productive way? So that's where we focus our attention. And so we look at not necessarily, I don't call it work-life balance anymore. It's almost, how do we help people find harmony between the way they work and how they live? Because now we've got hybrid working, we've got other mechanisms to help people and support them in a different way.
Us, myself, I think that harmony is so important. And I know you mentioned you had an entrepreneurial stint, so finding that harmony is critical for long-term sustainability and the work that you do. To kind of go back, I know you had mentioned that you took a very intentional and thoughtful response to George Floyd. And as the global head of people, you lead strategy for a workforce of over 200,000 people across 153 countries. That is not an easy task, and by any means. And so we'd love to understand, how do you work to balance some of these overarching corporate strategies that you're mentioning with maybe some of the unique needs and cultural nuances of your various employees in different markets that you're a part of?
I'm incredibly privileged to be doing the work that I'm doing, but there is no way that I'd be able to do it without a lot of help and support from my colleagues. So what I can say about that is there's a lot of collaboration. The culture of the firm, we always talk about together and for better, which are two of our values, that we always better when we work together. The way that we work is through collaboration. So whatever we are doing in the center is guided and informed by what the heads of people in the 144 countries are doing. So I know it would be unbelievable that you can work with 144 people at the same time. Of course, we've got structures that actually, regional structures that help us. We've got the heads of people for the regions. We've got heads of people for our big member firms, our board countries. So I work quite closely with those heads of people to make sure that the strategies that we're putting together are infused with the reality on the ground. The way that I like describing it is that it's almost as if what we do is put together a book, but it's got chapters, and those chapters will have nuances that are colored by the way that things work in a particular country. Having said that, there are areas where we don't compromise that much. And the reason for that is there are things that make us who we are as a firm. And I think every organization have those things. In our case, our values and behaviors are something that we keep consistent. Our purpose is consistent. There are a number of areas where we do need to stay consistent, but we work together to make sure that what we've got as interventions and strategies can be applied to different countries and different cultural environments.
So would you be open to kind of giving an example of what you just mentioned, of where maybe you have to prioritize consistency, or an example of some of those values coming into action?
So maybe let me just continue with the values of the firm. So it's important that every person inside the organization understands what the behavioral expectations are of them. And that is not something that we change. I don't change the values that I believe in when I move from one country to the other, which is what we do. And it actually gives us a language, and it makes us who we are. So if you come across people who work for the firm, they do have the same language on some things, the things that we truly believe in. So that's an important element of having some level of consistency there.
And I think that's something to be celebrated in a workforce that is so diverse, so many cultures. Even at Symba, we celebrate different cultures. Being Iranian American myself and my co-founder, in India, we celebrate and educate the team as well on so many different activities. So I celebrate that with you and the work that you're doing. I'd love to also transition to understanding a little bit more about how you've been able to invite this inclusive and diverse workforce and embrace the idea of these structures, whether that is flexible arrangements and also remote settings.
Yeah, we've always had a hybrid work environment, actually, because most of the time we have our client-facing people working with our clients at our client venues. Then we've got the office. So we used to have, before the pandemic, a two-pronged approach for most people. You're either at the office or you're at a client. Now there's a third dimension, which is working from home. And what we've done is we've looked at what our people are actually looking for and looked at enabling that. We enable it through a number of means. That everybody has invested in technology, which we have done, but we've also invested in resources. So making sure that the home offices, a number of our member firms have provided for that, the home office can work and all of those things. But I think underlying all of that is, in a changing world of work, what we're hearing quite clearly is that people are looking for a sense of choice. They want agency. They want to have more of a voice around how they work and where they work. But organizations also are aware that we need to continue building cultures that make sense. We need to be able to train and develop people. So there's this meeting somewhere in between of the things that we need to build on to be successful as an organization, combined with the things that our people actually desire. And it's interesting because the key to it, we are learning every day, is around building a trusting relationship and a trusted relationship between us as an organization, as people working in the organization. But it also reminds me of Daniel Pink's 3 areas of motivation, his theory of motivation. It's interesting because it's been around for a long time, where he spoke about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And more, those are the things that this remote world of working, this is what seems to be being called for even more at this point. So we're doing everything possible to make sure that we've got fundamental principles that we're going to follow, but we also encourage team leaders and managers to determine how work gets done at a more localized level, to make sure that people feel heard, to make sure that we actually accommodate as much as possible. But we also strongly encourage people to meet as teams and to still have that personal touch as well. But yeah, that's how we're looking at it at the moment, Ahva.
Understand, and that's really a notion we believe so much at Symba, and that's why we're named Symba for symbiotic relationships, right? It is this joining, as you talk about, and this kind of meeting of 2 different teams and coming into a union in a positive way. and it takes healthy trust and communication, as you're saying. And one of the final questions that we like to ask all the executives that come on the show is around our mission, which is open up the workforce. And to us at Symba, that means a future of work that supports equitable access to work and wealth creation. We'd love to get your perspective on what are the next steps leaders need to take in order to open up the workforce.
There's so much opportunity at the moment to open up the workforce to all participants. So if I think of one of the big conversations that everybody's having is the changing nature of the skills that are needed in business. And that gives all of us as business leaders an opportunity to look at where are these places where we can provide for apprenticeship, easier access to skills for more people to join the workforce. Of course, that doesn't apply for every single role, but there will be areas that are more aligned to that type of strategy. So where we can, how do we provide spaces for that? We do have some of that inside our organization. And I think the other side to this is also challenging ourselves to go where we don't normally go to search for skills and create opportunity for more people to join. We've started looking at diverse areas where we can recruit. You would know that we recruit a lot from universities. So can we stretch the number of universities that we recruit from, which allows us to have a more diverse workforce coming in? Can we provide apprenticeship? Can we provide, even if it's not just for recruiting people, can we somehow contribute to the growth of people's skills and therefore to better their quality of life? And one of the things that we are looking at and we've committed to is to train up 10 million people and touch them in some shape or form by 2030. So there are programs that we're starting to look at that could fuel that. And I mean, we are a training ground, and that's one of the areas about my work that I really, really enjoy, because the majority of our people are really young and it's their first opportunity for work. So it's a huge responsibility for us as a firm. But to do that for everyone in an equitable way will even make it better. So that's what we committed to.
We couldn't agree more with you. And so we're not speaking our language here at Symba. We're passionate about these opportunities like apprenticeships and internships to really open up the workforce. So thank you for sharing more about the impact and work that you're having on such a global scale. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to share in our audience and listeners today?
No, just to thank you, Ahva. I've enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you so much again for the work and impact you're doing. It's been an honor, Jack.
Thanks.